Hi, everybody. This lesson is going to cover cardiovascular disease risk factors. Up until now, we have spent a lot of time identifying what those cardiovascular diseases are, and now we're going to take a look at what puts us at risk for those diseases. Just to remind you that our targets for this lesson are to identify controllable and uncontrollable risk factors for cardiovascular disease, to recognize the values for healthy blood pressure and also for high blood pressure, and to explain the differences between HDL and LDL cholesterol. It's very important to know these risk factors and to know what your risk is of cardiovascular disease, because if you know what your risk is, then you'll be more likely to do something about it, and you'll know what to do to help reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease in the future. Before you started watching this video, you should have taken a look at the risk factor note sheet, which looks like this, and you were to use Teen Health and Wellness. I gave you the link in the lesson activity down here at the bottom under resources. You were supposed to use this link to Teen Health and Wellness to complete the controllable and uncontrollable risk factors. And I put a suggestion in here as well that for each risk factor listed, you should be adding a statement that explains why it is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So right now, this page should be completed. And if you haven't done that yet, you might want to go back and do that before you finish this video. So let's start with this first picture. I don't know if you can take a guess at what I'm going for with this picture. If you are thinking age, then you are correct. So aging is going to increase your risk of those damaged and narrowed arteries. And as you get older, the heart muscle gets weaker and it gets thicker, which is going to increase that risk of cardiovascular disease. The next picture, take a guess at what we're looking at here. If you're thinking gender, you are correct. Men are generally at greater risk of heart disease than women. However, a woman's risk is going to increase after menopause. And as we go through these risk factors, you are going to want to be looking at your risk factor note sheet and adding any important information that you did not get the first time around. So these are two uncontrollable risk factors so far. We said that age is the first thing that you cannot control. And then our second uncontrollable risk factor is gender. A third uncontrollable risk factor, we see a tree there. Hopefully you're thinking family history or heredity. A family history of heart disease is going to increase your risk of coronary artery disease, especially if you have a parent that has developed it at an early age. And when we say early age, we mean before the age of 55 for a male relative, and then 65 for a female relative. Another uncontrollable risk factor that has to do with race. African Americans, American Indians, and Mexican Americans are more likely to have heart disease than Caucasians. So that completes our uncontrollable risk factors. Now let's take a look at our controllable risk factors. The first one, you guessed it, has to do with smoking, and that is nicotine. Nicotine is a drug, and what nicotine does is it constricts your blood vessels, which means it makes them smaller. And carbon monoxide from using nicotine can damage the lining of those blood vessels, making them more susceptible to atherosclerosis. If you remember, we talked about atherosclerosis. That is when fat deposits on the artery walls. Heart attacks are going to be more common in smokers than in non-smokers. Another controllable risk factor, you guessed it, has to do with your diet. A diet that is high in fat salt, sugar, and cholesterol is going to contribute to the development of heart disease. And we're going to take a closer look at that when we start talking about nutrition. Another controllable risk factor has to do with your blood pressure. Uncontrolled high blood pressure can result in hardening and thickening of your arteries, which will narrow the blood vessels in which the blood flows. So if you think about it, narrower vessels are going to make it harder for the blood to flow through. Your heart is going to have to work harder to pump that blood through, and that's going to be a lot of wear and tear on the heart. I'm going to stop this part of the video now to give you a chance to watch the video on high blood pressure. So I'll stop here. I'm going to post this video for you to watch next, and I want you to include a 1-sentence summary for high blood pressure. You should have high blood pressure listed on your controllable list here. Make a 1-sentence summary next to that so that you can remember what it is that you watched in this video.